Beginning in 235 AD, the Roman Empire enters the age of the barracks emperors, men made emperor not in Rome, but by soldiers in distant frontier camps. Between AD 235 and 259, the imperial title is seized more than a dozen times, not in Rome, but on the Rhine and the Danube in Africa, and in the east in front of assembled troops. Some reign for years, others last only weeks. Many are killed by the very soldiers who just hailed them. One of them is only 13. The pattern repeats, simple and brutal. An army removes the sitting emperor, proclaims its commander, and presents the rest of the empire with a done deal. These aren't isolated coups. This is a system, one that produces emperors and usurpers in rapid succession. Who survives this spiral? Can Rome find stability again, and at what price? In March 235, on the Rhine frontier near Mogontiacum, today's Mainz, Emperor Severus Alexander is killed by his own soldiers, along with his mother, Julia Mamania. In the same camp, the legions proclaim Maximinus Thrax emperor. The succession happens without formal institutions, without consultation with Rome, without political mediation. Power changes hands in the field by acclamation, by the army's decision. Maximinus controls one of the largest concentrations of troops in the empire. In Upper Germany, between the Rhine and the Danube, he commands more than 60,000 soldiers, roughly a fifth of Rome's entire army, under a single leader. That's what makes his elevation instantly credible. When the news reaches Rome, the Senate has no real alternative. Without an army of its own, it accepts the choice the troops have made. It recognizes Maximinus, but distrusts him deeply, and in 238 declares him a public enemy. From that point on, the center of power shifts to the frontier. Between 235 and 236, Maximinus stays with the army and rules from the borderlands. He campaigns against the Alemanni, the Chatti, and other Germanic tribes on the Rhine, basing his legitimacy on one principle: as long as the army fights and gets paid, the emperor survives. He seeks no approval in Rome and strikes no bargains with the aristocracy. With no political base in the capital, Maximinus has only one source of legitimacy: the army's loyalty. Keeping it requires regular pay, donatives, and constant campaigning, and that demands money now. So he increases the tax burden on some of the empire's richest provinces: proconsular Africa, Asia, and Achaia, far from the frontier, but essential to state revenue. In Rome, the emperor seems increasingly distant. On the frontier, he isn't a politician at all. He's a commander, leading men and handing out rewards. In 238, the entire system explodes into view, suddenly visible, simultaneous, and uncontrollable. Opposition to Maximinus breaks out far from the Rhine, in one of Rome's richest provinces, proconsular Africa. The revolt begins at Thysdrus, then quickly spreads to Carthage. Local elites, squeezed by tax pressure, proclaim Gordian I and Gordian II co-emperors, not out of ideology, but out of necessity. The father, elderly and respected, brings senatorial legitimacy. The son provides continuity. It's an attempt to present the Senate with a ready-made government before Maximinus can react. But the African revolt collapses within weeks. Capellianus, governor of Numidia and commander of Legio III Augusta, remains loyal to Maximinus and marches on Carthage. Gordian II dies in the first clash. When the news reaches him, Gordian I takes his own life. In Rome, the Senate intervenes directly. Realizing Maximinus can no longer be ignored or removed by traditional politics, it appoints two Augusti, Pupienus and Balbinus, in a last-ditch attempt to set the authority of the capital against the power of the frontier armies. Under pressure from the streets, it also accepts the very young Gordian III as Caesar. Maximinus responds the only way he knows how, with the army. He marches into Italy and lays siege to Aquileia, the gateway to the peninsula. But here, the machine jams. The siege drags on. Supplies thin out. Confidence wavers. In the spring, Maximinus and his son are killed by their own soldiers in camp. Their bodies are beheaded, and the heads are sent to Rome as proof the regime is over. A brutal gesture, but politically unmistakable. Back in Rome, the power-sharing arrangement between Pupienus and Balbinus collapses within weeks. The two men distrust each other and paralyze the government. The Praetorian Guard, hostile to the Senate and never truly loyal to either emperor, exploits the split. The guards seize them, drag them away, torture them, and kill them. Their mutilated bodies are displayed in public as a message. In Rome, power belongs to whoever controls the weapons. With the Praetorians and the crowd behind him, the Senate proclaims Gordian III emperor, the grandson of Gordian I, and the last remaining piece of the Gordian faction. Gordian III is only 13, and that is precisely why he becomes a compromise. He suits the Senate because he commands no personal army. He suits the Praetorians because he can be controlled. And he suits the frontier commanders because he poses no immediate threat to any of them. He isn't chosen for strength, but because at that moment, no one has a real incentive to remove him. In just a few months, the empire has seen 6 emperors rise, and none has managed to build a stable government. By late 241, Gordian III leaves Rome and heads east. It isn't a political choice, it's a military necessity. In Syria, along the Euphrates, and in Mesopotamia, the young emperor's credibility will be tested. The headquarters shifts to Antioch, the logistical hub of the Eastern Empire. From there, operations begin against the Sasanian realm of Shapur I, an aggressive opponent able to strike deep into Roman territory. Gordian doesn't direct the campaign himself. He stays at the front as a political guarantee, a visible emperor for the troops and for the Senate. Real command lies with the Praetorian prefect Timotheus, Gordian's father-in-law and the key figure driving the war effort. Once again, the empire is governed through delegation. In 243, the Roman army wins a significant victory at Rassena in Mesopotamia. It matters, but it doesn't stabilize the frontier or remove the Sasanian threat. The distances remain vast, supply lines fragile, and the balance still precarious. In 244, after Timotheus dies, Gordian III dies as well, during a withdrawal along the Euphrates in disputed circumstances. Sources disagree on the details, but the political effect is immediate. Philip the Arab, now Praetorian prefect and the key figure in the chain of command, is proclaimed emperor by the troops. The frontier cannot be left without a leader. There's no time for a power vacuum. In wartime, succession has to be immediate. In 244, Philip the Arab returns from the frontier to Rome and tries to restore order at home. In 248, Rome celebrates its 1000th anniversary. It's propaganda in its purest form. Games, ceremonies, and above all, commemorative coins. Messages meant to project continuity and control. But on the frontiers, the reality is the opposite. Emergencies, raids, and constant reaction. In those same years, usurpers appear on the Danube and in the east, Pacatianus and Iotapianus. Hailed by local armies, their rule is brief. They last weeks, and they are removed by the same troops that raised them. The system is already slipping out of control. In 249, Philip sends Decius to restore order on the Danube. Yet it is there that the army acclaims Decius instead. Decius marches on Italy and defeats Philip near Verona. The new emperor tries to hold the state together through discipline. In 250, Decius orders public sacrifices to the traditional gods. It wasn't aimed at one group alone. It was meant as a public test of loyalty inside a crisis-stricken empire. In Egypt, papyri preserve the libelli, written certificates proving that a citizen had performed the sacrifice when officials demanded proof. But the frontier sets the pace. Between 250 and 251, large Gothic groups crossed the lower Danube. In 251, at Arbritus in Lower Moesia, the Roman army suffers a disaster. Decius and his son Herennius Etruscus die. It is one of the rare cases of an emperor falling in battle against an external army, a massive political and psychological blow. After Decius dies at Abritus, troops along the lower Danube and Moesia proclaim Trebonius Gallus emperor. In Rome, however, Hostilian, Decius' son, remains. He had already been named Caesar and is now associated with power, probably as Augustus, to preserve dynastic continuity and calm the Senate. A few months later, Hostilian dies in Rome, likely from the plague. His death removes the last direct representative of Decius' dynasty and leaves Trebonianus Gallus as sole emperor. Gallus then elevates his own son, Volusian, as co-ruler. The regime remains fragile. In 253, Commander Alemannius, acclaimed emperor by the troops after a victory over the Goths on the Danube, marches into Italy. As he advances, Gallus' own soldiers kill Gallus and Volusian before the armies even meet, and switch to Aemilianus' side. But Aemilianus' power is short-lived. Valerian advances from the west, already proclaimed emperor by his troops in the Rhine and Danube regions. When it becomes clear that Valerian's army is larger and better organized, Aemilianus' soldiers abandon him, kill him, and proclaim Valerian emperor before a decisive clash. Behind all of this, another factor magnifies the crisis, the so-called Plague of Cyprian. Some sources speak of thousands dying each day in Rome for weeks at a time, and many historians argue the demographic impact was devastating, possibly over 10% of the population in parts of the empire. 253 shows one thing clearly. With multiple fronts and overlapping crises, the throne changes hands at the speed of events themselves. By late 253, power looks consolidated again, but only on the surface. Valerian is recognized as emperor by the Western armies and quickly elevates his son Gallienus as co-emperor. 2 Augusti. It's a rational division of labor, not a guarantee of stability. Valerian takes the east, Gallienus remains in the west. In the west, Gallienus must hold a long, porous frontier. Pressure from Germanic peoples is constant on the Rhine. Instability on the Danube does not end after Abritus. Every troop movement solves one emergency and creates another. Reinforce one sector, and you weaken the next. It's a balance maintained only through rapid interventions over and over. In the east, Valerian shifts his headquarters to Syria, using Antioch as his hub, and focuses on the Euphrates corridor. His opponent is Shapur I. After years of raids and campaigning, the frontier now demands the emperor's personal presence and massive resources. Meanwhile, proclamations on the Danube do not stop. Between 258 and 259, the death of the young Valerian II, named Caesar by his father Gallienus, and tensions in the Balkan provinces fuel new local claimants. Figures like Longinus and Regulianus rise briefly and are eliminated, but they reveal how fragile the chain of command has become. By late 259, the two Augusti are still standing, but they have not solved the underlying problem. They have only split the crisis across two fronts. By late 259, the decisive front is in the east. Valerian concentrates his forces in Syria, with Antioch as his base, and pushes along the Euphrates toward Roman Mesopotamia. The goal is to stop Shapur I before Persian pressure turns frontier cities into breaking points. Distances are immense, supply lines fragile, and the army already carries years of campaigning. Losses, exhaustion, disease. Every option is risky. Advance and you expose yourself. Halt and you concede the initiative. Negotiate openly and the troops may read it as weakness. In early 260, Valerian reaches the region around Edessa and Osroene with an army that has to act fast. And Rome is about to learn just how vulnerable an emperor can be when war closes in. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode, where we'll see what happens to Valeria at Edessa.